Okay, I think I can start. All right, thanks to Donna, to CFDE, and everybody for inviting me to share the little project I've been working on with two different classes over the past couple semesters. Yeah, maybe a little background on myself and my own teaching approach, and then I'll get into some of the nuts and bolts of what we've been doing. So I remember early on in my graduate education, I was exposed in one of my pedagogy seminars to these two dichotomous pedagogical models, which were back then characterized as being a sage on the stage versus a guide on the side. And instinctively, I was drawn, of course, to the latter, but nevertheless found myself in my early days following more of the former. And as the years have passed, I find myself in that kind of ironic state where, on the one hand, I'm arguably more informed about my topic, and so therefore more of a sage, but finding myself increasingly interested in no longer playing that role and being much more of a guide. And influencing this, just to give a little theoretical background, is the work of the London group and their multi-literacies pedagogy. That's played a big role in how I've approached my own teaching. I don't have time to go into great detail about that, but really a key concept for their thinking that has relevance, I think, for this presentation is their idea that we need to engage our students really as designers. Designers of solutions, designers of their own learning pathways, and designers of really new meanings of kind of the materials and the resources that we're examining in class. The challenge then for me became the practical implementation of this approach in terms of specific tasks and projects for my classes. And that's where I started to get interested in the possibilities of instructional technology. So I've been an eager participant in a lot of ECDS-sponsored workshops, which I appreciate greatly since then. And in March, roughly a year ago, 2015, I attended a session on Open Tour Builder, an application developed in-house at ECDS to create a web-based mobile geolocative tour of the Battle of Atlanta. Oops. There it is. I use the term geolocative to refer to the fact that the tour is tied into global positioning so that your mobile device tells you where you are on the tour. At the workshop itself, the focus was largely on how faculty members can use the application to create similar tours to highlight places central to one's teaching and research. And I appreciated that focus very much, but I was actually very interested in seeing if my students could use this app to create tours in German for different locations thematized in instruction. So I talked more with ECDS about this and got wonderful support and was able to pilot this application with students this past summer 2015, on the German Studies Department's Summer Study Abroad program in Vienna, Austria. This is a course, an intermediate level course that I taught focusing on immigration, integration in contemporary Austria. And one of the foci throughout the course was for each student to come to understand better the demographics and social milieu of the respective neighborhoods where they lived. So each student lives with a different host family, and the families are spread throughout the city. So each student lived in a different neighborhood or district in Vienna. And one way I decided to do that was to have them create a 5-stop tour, quite small, I guess, of sites and aspects of the neighborhood that they wanted to feature about their neighborhood. So the result was 6 different tours of Vienna. And just to give you a sense, is this scrolling? There it goes, okay. This is kind of how it begins. There's an introductory page tied into Google Maps, showing you the different stops. It's obviously not so relevant right now. We're very far from Vienna. And then each stop has, you can embed images about the place we're visiting. And obviously I was interested in, the text was written in German. And then you can move on to the next stop. And this obviously is meant to be used with a mobile device as you're moving throughout this one district. So we were pressed for time. It's an intensive summer program. We only had 3 weeks for the class. But I was encouraged enough by this experience to offer a 1-credit course this semester, this current semester, with the idea that students would create tours of sites of Emory and Atlanta. Again, it's a 1-credit course. We meet for 50 minutes every Friday. And unlike the Vienna course, there wasn't a specific thematic focus to the course. Thinking I would allow the students to kind of create tours of anything that was interesting to them, featured on campus or in Atlanta. And that's what they just actually finished those. So we have, there's only 3 students in the class, and myself, and I did a tour as well. I won't tell you which one I did. So one student did a look at Emory College, and as you perhaps noticed, there's been slight updates in the interface, and so now the stops are all loaded together. Images, you can create a slideshow, the text in German, and then moving on down through the site, and again tied in as well to Google Maps with directions from one tour stop to the next. And in both courses, in setting up these tours, we followed more or less the same approach. We began with some background readings about the respective places. So in Vienna, we did a fair amount of background reading on immigration, integration, also studying census data to understand the demographics of particular neighborhoods. For this course this semester, because I had the initial idea that they would focus on places at Emory, we actually read chapters of Gary Hawk and Sally Wolf King's edited volume Where Courageous Inquiry Leads, particularly the initial 5 or 6 chapters that provide some really interesting and thought-provoking chapters on some historical issues related to Emory. Thinking this would prompt them to pursue one of these topics. But as you perhaps can see, and you may not, I realize you don't speak German, but 2 of the 4 students chose to focus on topics not related to Emory at all. They simply focused on sites and locales in Atlanta. And I'll come back to this issue in a minute. So after some background readings to try and get them prompted to think about certain areas to focus on, topics to focus on, we then did some in-class practice with the app itself, guided by a manual created by ECDS to help them walk through this app. And if I haven't said so already, this is a very user-friendly app. Not very complicated. And we did have slight hiccups along the way. Even in Vienna, ECDS last summer was Stephanie Rogers, who's a PhD candidate in philosophy. And this semester, Sarah Melton. We're very quick to respond and offer very speedy feedback on how to address these little tiny issues. And then after some in-class practice, we then did some homework assignments where they developed one tour stop at a time. And obviously this is also for German language instruction, so then we turned to some peer review feedback where they both looked at the content and also tried themselves to take a hand at the language, and then I also provided the final feedback on the language. We also spent some time thinking about the genre of the tour stop, thinking about how to present for the students who did restaurants, how do you present a restaurant. So we looked at some models, so how do Germans or Austrians present online descriptions of restaurants. How do they present images or descriptions of a college campus, and then deconstructed those models to some degree to help us both think of the structure as well as the language you might want to call upon in creating those. So we followed this approach for each tour stop until the entire tour was done. The one component that we're still working on, and you can see this with, we were able to do it over the summer, but it didn't happen, is I was very keen on having a comment feature. The idea is that, because ultimately we'd like others to take this tour. It's not just for our class, but others to take the tour and then to leave comments about the tour, so students would have feedback and see this really as a living document that extends beyond the class. Unfortunately, we used a Discus, if you're familiar with Discus, and their HTML embed code worked in the summer, and it doesn't work now. They made some updates, and so we're thinking about how to address that. But this actually is a very important part of the tour for me, because I really want the students to understand and take into account that there is an audience for their tours, Mark Bousquet in film studies uses this notion of moving away from what he calls the Dear Teacher project, where it's simply not just the student communicating with the teacher, but really thinking about having a larger audience for your work. And unfortunately, so far, I've looked at all tours, and we haven't had any comments. So one day, perhaps, we'll have some feedback. But the idea is that the students would begin to see that there are people taking their tours, providing feedback, and responding to what they've done. And of course, the tours in German of places in Atlanta, I imagine there's even a smaller population for those kinds of tours. There's arguably, it's not the most natural thing to think of to create a tour of the Emory campus in German. But we're going to work on publishing that on our website as well. We're going to encourage our lower level students to consider these tours. And perhaps someday we can even add the comment feature. But yeah, the ideal scenario would be that students would get periodic comments from tour users, causing them to continue to evaluate the tour and the places they featured. So moving forward, I guess what maybe this was my own anxieties about their technology and asking students to do something which was quite new to them and to me. I didn't push the envelope that far in terms of what I asked them to explore in terms of the tour. As you can see, at least for this semester, I tried to prompt them to think about some contested issues on campus to create tours about those. And as you can see, they backed away from those. They chose restaurants, they chose sites in Atlanta, they chose a very straightforward tour, a nice tour of Oxford College, but the contested issues dealing with race, with gender, with the environment that are featured very nicely in that edited volume by Gary and Sally, they decided to back off on those. So a future instantiation is I'm going to push that and not let them get away so much with pursuing more, how should we say it? Yeah, more fun tours, but rather I want them to engage more academically with some of these issues. So if you're curious, because we still have 5 weeks left in the semester, we now, the second stage of the course is we're going to work together on a more of a game using a different app developed at UW-Madison called ARIS, where we are going to look at a specific issue on campus. We're going to look at current construction practices of new buildings, and we'll be using the Rose Library. But that's with an app that wasn't developed in-house, so I won't be talking about that today. So we just started on that, but the idea is involving some archival footage of these sites, pre- and post-construction, and to kind of engage them more as citizen journalists, I guess, instead of simply as tour builders. So that's kind of the next step. And see, even with the Vienna tour, is they stayed pretty much on, I would say, on the surface and in terms of engaging some of the issues in their neighborhoods, presenting more of a sightseeing tour of the neighborhood rather than really engaging with some of the immigration and integration issues that are very central to what's going on in Vienna and certainly in Europe right now with the refugee situation. So that's the next step for me, and I'm not faulting the students. I think I was the one who backed off a bit when it came to thinking about topics. I was just eager for them to engage with a place, to think about the language needed to engage with that place, and then the next step will be then to, like I said, to push them a bit more in terms of, again, some of these more contested issues. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there. I saw a hand go up. I don't know if you had a quick question. Yeah. Yeah, the Vienna Tours, yeah, it's a URL, so I was very thankful that ECDS, I'm sorry, which one is it here? They created our own URL. It's simply vienna.ecdsweb.org. And so the idea is that we'll be using this each summer, and this we'll be building tours, adding tours each summer. So it becomes quite a database of potential tours of Vienna that our current students can take when they get there, and that ideally the word might get out to Viennese or tourists that, hey, there's some interesting tours to try, and we'd like to hear your feedback on those. And the same thing with the on-campus tours. Those are, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at my tabs today. No, where is it? This one? No. This one, yes. This one is German Tours. .ecdsweb.org. So again, ECDS was very nice to give us tailor-made URLs for each of our tour sites. So again, I hope to offer this course in the future, and so we'll build a repertoire of tours of Atlanta and an Emory in German for students and tourists and whoever wants to engage with those.
I have a question from an online person asking if there is translation to English.
There are not.
So you have to bring a German.
Right, right, okay.
We can share this. I'll send this around to everyone.
Yeah.
Like we've got everybody's contact information, so if people who speak German will want to go to these German restaurants or are going to be in Vienna. We'll get some comments for you, Max.
So this is actually one this is a tour of Emory, so you can begin to see. Trying to make this smaller, but so these are perhaps you can see the. Does the German make any sense to you? Stress-free zones on Emory, and so there have been 5 identified where if you're looking for a break from the daily stress of Emory, where to go.
Where are they? I would like to know.
Yeah, so we had.
The closest one.
Yeah. Let's see. Trying to back up here now. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. So we've got Toll Plaza. Do you know where Toll Plaza is? It's between Tarbutton and Modern Languages. There are wonderful bumblebees there right now. Okay. The Quadrangle.
Yes, I agree with that one.
The Reading
I
Room.
love that room.
The Rose Rare Book Library. Okay, and I guess that was it. Okay. It should be.
Okay, we've just got about 10 minutes left, and I know that Tim has to leave a little bit early, so if we could just get to the small groups, if you have questions for each faculty member about the specific technologies, and also if you could grab